Can't wait for the next episode to drop? Be one of the first to listen to Obscura, a true crime podcast, a day early, only on Himalaya. Himalaya is a brand new podcast app where you can find every single podcast you love. Whether you're a podcaster or a fan, Himalaya has got your back. Discover personally curated playlists and show your favorite podcasters some love with Himalaya's tip jar. It's free, it's the easiest to use, and they're adding cool new features every day. Go to your app store, download Himalaya, that's Himalaya, and don't forget to follow Obscura once you're there.
The following audio may contain graphic descriptions of violence or audio clips of real-life distressing moments. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Obscura, where we shine a light on the dark.
Welcome, listener. I'm glad you're here. Why don't you have a seat next to the fire? Get yourself comfortable. You know, there is this idea that always fascinates me about the predators we cover. It's the preconceptions they have about themselves, their apparent use of compartmentalization. Before they commit a murder or a rape, how many know who they are? When they look in the mirror, do they see what's simmering below the surface? Do they see what's about to ratchet up to an overworked fury? Or do they only see deluded deception of their own mask, surprised by what they're greeted with when they get to know their own nature? Are these moments of clarity? Listener, have you ever been drunk at a party? No, not just any drunk. Barely able to walk drunk. You excuse yourself to take a leak. Have you, in that state, looked into the mirror, experienced a few moments of total sobriety? What if in that moment, beyond your ego, you saw a translucent nest of spiders, sinuous and vibrating? A hint at all that chalky black pitch you once considered a soul. In the case of Blake Leibel, we get a bit more insight than usual. In his attempts to find glory beyond that silver spoon he was born with, Blake may have stumbled upon his inner darkness. And upon seeing it, this looming image of self-destruction not only consumed him, but has swallowed a loved one whole. Listener, today's episode gets grisly before the end. It's been described as Hollywood's worst ever murder. If details and descriptions of the fallout of a particularly brutal murder, right down to medical accuracy, obtained from autopsy reports bother you, then this may not be the episode for you. Now, let's get on with it. Part 1. Gray Matter. Blake Leibel was born on May 8, 1981, in Toronto, Canada. But we're not going to jump into his story right away. You see, Blake presents himself as a morbid puzzle, and it's worth gathering all the pieces before we attempt to solve him. So let's take a detour and take a thorough look at his family before moving on to Blake himself. Lauren Leibel, Blake's father, is a wealthy real estate mogul who, in 2006, was inducted into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. He once sailed for Canada in the 1976 Summer Olympics. In 2003, Lauren won a second World Superboat Championship, set an official APBA world speed record of 177 miles per hour, and had a single run of 201 miles per hour, obtaining his dream of breaking the 200 miles per hour barrier in APBA water speed records. While these are all commendable accomplishments, and it's worth noting that Lorne came from wealth, giving himself a significant head start. His father, Stanley Leibel, also participated in Summer Olympics and was a prominent real estate mogul himself. It's also worth noting that many reports of Lorne's achievements seem to skip over the fact that Lorne holds the distinction for being the first Canadian Olympian to piss hot for performance-enhancing drugs. See, steroids. Combine this with the many legal battles that troubled Lorne and the many accusations of drugs and alcohol use, and how our boy Lorne was a noted frequenter of sex workers. Well, the alleged sexually transmitted diseases he carries doesn't seem that surprising or out of character. Eleanor Chittell, Blake's mother, also came from money. Her father, Paul Chittell, was involved in the manufacturing of plastics, was able to take a small company and expand it to the point that the family broke into the upper class. When Paul died in 1998 from complications related to a stroke he'd had just 2 years prior, he left a bizarre will, which included the caveat that if any potential beneficiary was carrying the HIV virus, they were to be excluded from the will. So paranoid about an HIV-carrying beneficiary receiving part of his fortune, Paul requested that his will executor test each heir before handing out inheritance. Eleanor's mother and Blake's grandmother, Leona Chittell, was diagnosed with acute bipolar disorder. This caused her to have what the media has described as long bouts of mental illness and a complicated legal history. This could be a window into what Blake Leibel just barely hid inside of him for many years. But getting back on track, to put things bluntly, Blake was born into a wealthy, powerful, and weird family. The media seems to have dismissed him as a trust fund kiddie gone bad, when from what we've just outlined, we see that his family history encompasses a story of well-established mental illness, drug abuse, deception, and odd behavior. And as a society, we seem to share this delusion that money protects human folly, that with enough dosh, we are immune to diseases, both physical and mental, and while grass and money are green, we all bleed red. A large bank account can go a long way to safeguard you from many physical and mental ailments. That gray matter, encased in bone and floating in a pool of cerebrospinal fluids, is a different matter entirely. Part 2. The Shunned Prince. Imagine, if you will, listener, being bestowed unimaginable, near limitless opportunities, and still being incapable of reaching a goal that wasn't bought for you. Before his story reached its penultimate conclusion, Blake Leibel received $18,000 a month, just to exist. He was the heir to a large inheritance and mansion, born into success, but was Blake born with respect? With talent of his own? Blake Leibel was involved with the comic book crowd and carried with him a reputation of being unhygienic. As someone who once spent time getting weekly pulls from comic book stores, I can say confidently that the reputation of comic book fans is sadly earned. I've been sandwiched between two large men with ratty graphic t-shirts, nearly suffocated by the smell. But that's not to say all fans of fringe hobbies are like this. I've known plenty of comic book and board game fans who weren't afraid of a bar of soap. But Blake fit the stereotype. Blake wanted to be famous, which may be part of why he later opted for infamy. He'd fall into a marijuana-induced manic haze when creating. I imagine him with his bushy, yet greasy dark hair, pacing the halls, muttering to himself, just trying to find the recipe to the self-earned respect he so desperately craved. At times, he dressed in large coats, with some referencing Columbine in hindsight. But to his friends, at the time, he seemed incapable of violence. Sure, an outsider who lacked some social cues, but nothing so awful as to what he would become. Like many before him, Leibel eventually left his hometown, moved to Hollywood, where he so badly wanted to become a renowned comic book writer and have all the fame that accompanied such a dream. I'm going to play an interview with Blake Leibel for you. It lasts about 3 minutes, and it's just to give you an idea of his frenetic energy at the time. For some context, this is at the 2008 New York Comic-Con.
And we are here with United Free Worlds. You are a comic book company.
Yes.
That has an amazing book out right now, and it's actually a little bit, you say that it's a little bit different from everybody else out here, and why is that?
Our work is slightly different because we take more time in making the artwork a higher quality. We take a very extreme detail. It's very serious to us. And I guess that's what sets us above everyone else, is that we like to take the time to really put in the extra effort. Because this isn't school. There's no reason to rush this or do it the night before.
That's true.
So tell us a little bit about the storyline behind.
The storyline is about when a new planet enters our solar system, the Earth unites and we put down our weapons, and we find a new enemy that's about 12 to 18 feet, and they ride and control dinosaurs like dogs. And when we go to war, they absolutely annihilate us the first time. To give you a small example, 50 pterodactyls connected to a big net open up and swallow in about 400 helicopters, carry them into the sky, and then cut that net like it was nothing and let that bag of helicopters fall to the ground. Now imagine, for a moment, being inside of that bag of helicopters. What would that look like? How would you feel?
I'd probably be dead by that time, so... Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So where did these dinosaurs and people come from? What world?
They come from a planet called Creator that has metals far, far stronger than anything we have on Earth. They use dinosaur skin, bones, and teeth for all sorts of resources. They have wonderful, abundant fruits and big old Praetorian turkeys and chickens, but they're not called that. And it's just a very wonderful way of life. There are 3 different tribes run by 3 different ladies. One tribe is very much like Sparta, where the women have very little control. Another tribe, the women have a lot of control, and they get more fierce warriors because they're very emotional. And then one tribe has an equal balance between men and women, and from them come the greatest warriors and the most successful tribesmen, which does a little parallel into real life, which is that a mom and dad are very nice.
And are you the creator yourself?
Yes.
Okay, and you write all the storylines and everything like that?
Yeah, we'll start with little rudimentary designs and sketch out how we kind of want it to look. Then it will go to some of the finest artists in the world, specifically Jason Raines did this book, who is just probably easily in the top 5 best artists of all time. Tightest pencil work, finest angles. He's also the designer of the show Spaceballs for Mel Brooks, which is quite impressive.
Nice. Very nice. Well, thank you so much for your time. We look forward to reading into United Free Worlds and look forward to hearing more from you guys in the future. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Even if he seems a little strange, the energy and charisma he possessed at the time will later be almost completely washed away. Looking at later court photos, he looks almost like a completely different person. The idea of Blake dying and only being known as a trust fund kiddie ate away at him. So, in an act of desperation, unable to find funding, he self-funded projects himself. This is part of what defines Blake Leibel. He's a narcissist who is incapable or unwilling to accept failure. His world is self-idolized by money he's been given. So, he lacks the lessons many of us learn at a young age. That sometimes, you just lose. Sometimes, no matter how much the deck is stacked in your favor, you still bust. Not only does Blake crave the recognition, the fame, he wants the power that comes with it. Because that power allows him to continue this trajectory of controlling others to feed his self-obsession. Part of what fueled this obsession for power was jealousy. Sweet and painful jealousy. Blake's brother Cody is outwardly ostentatious. He has a rotation of inherited Ferraris that he drives to even minor gatherings. Cody was once targeted by card sharks, became an easy mark due to his flashiness and arrogance. There are pictures online of him standing next to Tara Reid. Cody played shoulder to shoulder with stars like Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire. A film based on these events, called Molly's Game, was released on December 25th, 2017, and is by all counts a decent flick. Blake was somewhat paranoid about Cody rubbing shoulders with criminals in these poker games. Some sources claim that Cody was once targeted and fleeced $1 million from Russian mafia. At a young age, Cody was always the favorite son, showered with most of their father's attention. When their parents split, Cody lived with his father, the most expensive section of the city, and Blake lived with their mother in the second most expensive part of the city. To many, just being part of an extravagant lifestyle would be a dream. But to Blake, this clearly labeled him as number 2, and for someone as narcissistic as Blake Leibel, this simply was unacceptable. To further complicate this situation, Blake and Cody's mother, Eleanor, died in 2011. Blake took the fight for his mother's estate to court. To Blake, this was the estate he grew up in, so Cody deserved no percentage of the estate that was worth $12 million. By the end of the ensuing court battle, Blake landed less than half this amount. Again, this was not acceptable. For Blake, things were very all or nothing. In his mind, it was his money, and he shouldn't have to share it with anyone. This was also how Blake viewed his time involved with different mediums, but his projects were often frivolous, not very remarkable. He made a short film called Bald, about a balding college student seeking hair transplants. The student creates a website full of half-naked women to fund these transplants.
I'm 20 years old, and I'm losing all of my hair.
Come in.
I can't live like this anymore.
What do you need money for?
So that I can get a hair transplant.
You let a doctor cut open your head?
Not just any doctor. I want the guy who did Matthew McConaughey.
I wish I slept in here last night.
Max, I'm gonna kick your ass.
I'm going bald, OB.
So, I had my first heart attack while playing with myself.
That's not so bad.
My mom and her bridge club found me.
The whole short film looks goofy and uninteresting, right out of the worst American Pie knockoffs. Blake was involved with the Spaceballs animated series as an animation director and character designer for exactly one episode. The series is widely panned and considered painfully unfunny by most people.
So?
That was 3 days ago.
And I'm still stuck in the final boss. He's this giant mutant space crab.
How would a mutant space crab get to be the boss of anything?
I don't know. Immunity to melted butter?
Well, you're never going to beat it.
There is a short film called Soulmates he directed in 2013 that I unfortunately can't find any footage of. There isn't much information on it, and this isn't helped by the fact that there was a feature film titled Soulmate that came out the same year. But what is maybe his most significant contribution to the arts, and what is worth taking a deeper look into, is Blake's graphic novel. Part 3. The Omen. Getting a firm grasp on how a killer ticks is something true crime fans clamor for. Ted Bundy is an example of someone who the true crime community has spent countless hours analyzing, but is ultimately left frustrated by. Bundy, a self-preservationist predator to the end, gave a sleep-inducing interview as his very last. In Bundy's mind, he thought if he aligned himself with the right group of people, he could escape the death penalty.
Yes, and and this is something I think I want to emphasize is the most damaging kinds of pornography. Again, I'm talking from personal experience, hard, real personal experience. The most damaging kinds of pornography are those that involve violence and sexual violence, because the wedding of those two forces, as I know only too well, brings about behavior that is just too terrible to describe.
The interview is just Bundy blaming pornography for the terror he unleashed on the world. And I imagine that Bundy was sure he could escape his fate and slither away up until the moment his executioner slammed that lever down. But not all killers are enigmas, or at least, not completely so. You see, Blake Leibel is a narcissist, the most extreme form, and in his unquenchable thirst for power and fame, he may have exposed his inner monster, even if unintentionally, and not in a way that could be described as minor, but as a fully published work of fiction, one that would later mirror reality. This work of fiction is a graphic novel. For those unaware of what graphic novels are, just think longer comic books. I'm going to provide images with a graphic novel on my website. If you're a visual person, maybe head to obscurecrimepodcast.com to check them out. The title of Blake's graphic novel, Syndrome, is in white bold letters, juxtaposed against a pale blue background. The cover features a baby's doll with part of its skull removed, its brain exposed. Listener, remember that imagery for later. Mentally file it away. The graphic novel tells the story of a neuropathologist who attempts to cure a serial killer. One panel features a woman on a morgue gurney. Another panel features corpses suspended by their feet, upside down. One full-page panel, in intrinsic detail, features a decapitated woman in bed, blood splattered across the room. Blake was involved in the creation of Syndrome from a conceptual level. The creators of the graphic novel have distanced themselves from it. On Amazon.com, it would cost you $110 just to purchase it. There are those who argue against the idea of Syndrome, offering insight into Blake Leibel, but the imagery would be too coincidental. It's very clear to this narrator that this was a glimpse into the future. Syndrome acted as a harbinger of death, an atrophied Robin set free by Leibel, foretelling the endless crepuscule he'd submerge Iana Cassian into. Part 4. The American Dream. Iana Cassian was born in Kiev, Ukraine. There, she lived with her mother, father, and sister, but always dreamed of moving to the U.S. She spoke fluent English and worked as a prosecutor. She mostly prosecuted those who committed tax-related crimes. Despite her white-collar work, Iana remained curious and adventure-seeking. It's hard to truly iron that kind of behavior out. So in 2014, Iana's dream became a reality. She emigrated to the United States. She left her prosecuting days behind her and found work as a model in Los Angeles, California. Iana found near immediate success in this line of work. By July 2014, Blake Leibel filed for divorce from his wife and mother of their 2 children, Amanda Braun. Amanda Braun is a former model who, to this narrator, seems to have lost whatever affection she had for Blake. She showed up to exactly 1 court appearance, didn't so much as glance at Blake or his brother when she got up to leave. Blake left Amanda just months before Amanda gave birth to their 2nd child. Shortly after Blake's divorce with Amanda Braun, Iana became pregnant with their child. When Iana discovered that she was pregnant, she was overcome with excitement. She rushed to the phone, hands shaking, made an ecstatic phone call to her mother, Olga Cassian. Olga was of course excited herself. She was flown out in the spring of 2016 to witness the birth of her granddaughter. There really is nothing like the birth of a child. If you haven't been involved with such a life event, it can be hard to explain. Everyone is exhausted, stressed, on their last line, and then the baby is born, and the love you feel is incomparable. Thinking about this, really stopping to contextualize this between Iana and her mother Olga is important for me. This moment shared between 3 generations, Olga, Iana, and baby Diana. Iana was an intelligent woman who worked hard to achieve her dreams. Everything was coming together for her. Reading her coroner's report later, these things all came to mind. You see, listener, when I started this podcast, I expected to harden, that it came with the territory. But when I see charted on Iana's coroner's report, Her phanastale scar, which is from the incision of her cesarean section, it wrenches my stomach. May 2016, the week before Blake Leibel murders Iana, Blake is accused of sexual assault. He is arrested and bailed out by Iana. Blake wasn't prosecuted for the crime. The extent of the alleged sexual assault is unknown. Iana is obviously confused. Blake confesses that he's deeply jealous of the baby. Blake, being the extreme narcissist that he is, can't handle any attention away from himself, even if it's placed on his own child. Raising a family in the United States was Iana's ultimate goal. So it's with great pain for her that the baby is sent to live with her mother in an apartment a block away. Blake was so focused on being the center of attention that he paid for the apartment himself. To Blake, the baby was just another obstacle. Like with his brother Cody before the child, any ounce of attention not devoted to Blake was stolen from him. Despite recovering from a C-section, Blake demanded sex from Iana. Her physical health was of no consequence to him. And when it wasn't sex, it was the constant text messages. Any time spent out shopping, Iana's phone buzzed constantly from Blake's endless text messages. You see, Blake was terrified Iana might be seeking other men. A great irony, considering Blake himself wasn't afraid to seek the bed of other women. Her mother, Olga, would see the shift in Iana's mood when she received these texts. This type of behavior is sadly all too commonplace in 2019. It's this destructive desire and jealousy that would ultimately be Blake Leibel's undoing. Part 5. The Apartment. Fear enveloped Olga Cassian in a way that few will ever experience. The Tuesday before Iana Cassian died, Olga called 6 times. All 6 calls went to voicemail. She knew something wasn't right. A feeling like something is wrong like this. It's a hard thing to catalog. The goose flesh that crawls on your skin, the painful swell in your heart. Something is wrong, and you may lose a loved one. Olga Cassian didn't want that to happen. The United States was still a foreign place to her. She felt like a stranger. But she wouldn't stay complacent, though she didn't know what to do. She didn't have a vehicle. The baby was sleeping, so the police were the obvious next step. So, Olga called 911.
Oh, what's the mother's name on the line?
Olga Kasyan. My name is Olga Kasyan. I want to get my daughter out of that apartment safely. I want to open the doors to break into that apartment and get my daughter out. In 3 weeks since she had a C-section and she needs doctor's attention.
Okay, this is what I'll do. Tell her I will send deputies to do a welfare check to see if she is there.
Olga spent several excruciating minutes on hold. When she reached someone, they reassured they would check on Iana, but Olga doesn't know if this will be the case. Olga spends the day in nervous anticipation. Upon waking up the next morning, she's had enough. Olga is seen on surveillance camera circling Blake's apartment on foot. Olga, perhaps sensing it, looks up at Blake and Iana's apartment window and spots Blake staring at her. Olga heads to the parking gate and waits. Time passes. Olga knows something is wrong. She saw Blake, but not Iana. Iana would call her. She doesn't understand why the American police haven't checked on her daughter. The gate opens. Olga walks through the wide open gate and runs for it. Room 327. 3 floors up. Out of breath, Olga beats on the door. No answer. She then heads back outside and again calls the police. When a mother is upset, truly upset, I suspect most can sense it. This may have got the emergency personnel to come to their senses. That, or after a second call, they really didn't want the potential bad press. Police finally arrive. They're seen on camera taking casual strides to the apartment as Olga begs the officers to break the door down. But the officers inform her they don't have the right. After a failed phone call to Blake and waiting around, the police leave. Olga is upset. She feels a rush of anger, confusion, and desperation welling up inside her. But Olga has a grandchild to take care of, and she's exhausted her resources. She heads back to the apartment. On May 26, 2016, a Thursday, Olga called the police once again.
If she's there, we'll talk to her and ask her several questions and tell her that her mother's concerned, and because she hasn't heard from her in several days.
Yes, Mom. He won't open the door. They already tried to do that, and they tried to knock, but he doesn't open. He won't open the door.
Okay, we'll do another welfare check, and we will call her to let her know the outcome, and then we'll go from there as far as possibly doing a missing persons report.
Yes, Mom. When are you going to go there? Because your life is in danger.
We're going as soon as we hang up.
After speaking with a Russian interpreter, Olga finally convinces the police to break into room 327. When Olga and the police arrive to the apartment complex, Olga is told to sit outside on the sidewalk. The police reach the door and give it a few knocks. No answer. They yell for Iana. No answer. Blake. Again, no answer. When the police break through the door, they find that the room is disheveled, messy. They reach the hallway door and find that it's barricaded. So much so that the police have to remove the door from its hinges. After walking through the hall, police spot a bed in the guest bedroom stained with blood. They again call out to Blake. No answer. Police reach the master bedroom. Barricaded again. Police begin pushing through the barricade. But as they do, they hear a man calling out. Blake Leibel informs the police that he refuses to leave the room. Listener, I hope in this moment, Blake woke from his haze and the gravity of his actions set in. I hope terror took grip of him. Blake gives a sorry excuse. He tells police Iana is gone. The police, of course, don't buy it, but they're both at a standstill. Blake calls a friend, who travels to the apartment, and aids the police in convincing Blake to leave the bedroom on his own terms. The alternative could have ended far worse for him. Blake leaves the room in his underwear. His face is haunted. A picture of madness. I'm going to post it on the website. It's worth seeing. Listener, look into his eyes. What he's found, he can't return. The master bedroom is covered in blood splatter. There was an attempt at covering up the murder. A lot, but not all, of the blood was wiped up. Bloodstained bedding was dropped down a trash chute. A bed skirt that was later recovered from trash bags featured bloody handprints. Blake's pants were found with a passport and wads of cash. Investigators believe that the initial attempt was to clean up the condo, dispose of Iana's body, and leave the country. Iana is seen in bed, covered with a Mickey Mouse blanket. Iana fought. Blake's face was covered with scratches and bruises. A bite mark was left on Blake's arm, but Iana experienced a slow, torturous death. While living, she was mutilated. Iana was beaten. Blake bit into her arm, tearing away the flesh. He bit into her face. Her face and scalp were worked on with several instruments, some blunt, some sharp. And finally, she experienced avulsion of her scalp. So much scalp was ripped from Iana's head that the skin tore far enough to take an ear with the scalp. It took Iana 6 to 8 hours to die. Imagining the pain Iana experienced is impossible. She came to the United States to follow her dream, and her dreams were stolen from her by an overgrown, petulant child. A trust fund kitty who couldn't handle not being the center of attention for even a moment. Iana was buried in the Ukraine. She is survived by her daughter, Diana, and her mother, Olga. It's hard to find further information. I have no interest in seeking out her mother. She's been through enough. Part of me is saddened that Iana was buried in the Ukraine. Not because she shouldn't be with her family, but because it feels like one more indignity towards her. Iana wanted nothing more than to move to the US and start a family. In the end, she was forced to go back in the worst way imaginable. Epilogue. Iana officially died of exsanguination. Exsanguination is the act of draining a person, animal, or organ of blood. When investigators lifted the Mickey Mouse blanket, they found that Iana was ghostly pale. Blake Leibel was drug tested and only had trace amounts of marijuana in his system. When investigators reached out to his family, most, if not all, remained tight-lipped. In court, 2 years after the murder, Blake Leibel looked like a different person. The graphic novel, Syndrome, was heavily featured by the prosecution. Prosecution drove home how uncaring Blake was during and after the murder. Blake ordered takeout during the time Iana was dying. Olga stayed for the entire trial, and she saw graphic photos of her deceased daughter, something a mother should never see. Olga understandably remained spiteful against the LA police force. She was in a country foreign to her, and her daughter was in trouble, and no one would help. Blake Leibel was given a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. Blake's extended family hasn't given a cent towards supporting Iana's daughter, Diana. And personally speaking, shame on them. Diana lives in the Ukraine with Olga. I hope Diana helps fill the void the loss of Iana has created. I really do. I remember a time as a child, hiding in a large blanket, maybe playing games with other children. Hide and seek. After being found, I attempted to release myself from the warm folds of the fabric. But the weight of the thing fused my sense of direction, and for a brief moment of temporary insanity, I thought perhaps I'd never escape. Sometimes when I research these cases, the murders seem overwhelming. These awful men can feel like vacuous instruments that rise only to spread their disease. And though they seem different, they are congruent. Actions redundant throughout time, only halted by modern deterrence. But then I stop, and I think about the blanket. Maybe their crimes aren't all consuming as they initially seem. That the reality could be that most people are good, or at least trying to be good. And these killers of men, women, and children are like a drop of dark green bile secreted into a cup of clean water, tainting the human experience for the rest of us. Listener, what do you think? Are people kind, or are the good folk navigating a labyrinth of sharks in their social life? Do you mind handing me that bottle over there? Let's get this fire burning extra bright. This week, I have to give extra thanks to Maggie James. She did something incredible for the show. Her contribution can't be overstated. So listeners, pour one out for MJ tonight, even if the pouring is figurative. And a bit of a blanket thanks to all the Patreon supporters. We have grown so much in the past 2 months. I feel simultaneously prideful and humbled. Thank you for believing in Obscura. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for listening. And keep the fire burning.